Hey everyone, so this is what happens when you attempt to do live videos in horse pastures in rural areas where just as you're about to start your live video, all service goes. So I am recording this video for you and we'll post it. So what I want to do in today's video, this is day 2 of the workshop, and we have the main pieces of the workshop. The training, the first part came out yesterday on riding position. The part that's coming out tomorrow, which is Wednesday, April 26th, is going to be on connecting with the horse, on step-by-step training that really builds trust. And we're going to be looking at social behaviors of horses, and all of this really to dispel this myth that's so common in the horse world of being the boss. Okay, so that's tomorrow. And then on Friday, the third part of the workshop, we are focusing on building confidence. And I'm going to take you through an exercise on how to map out essentially your plan for building confidence. We're going to discuss understanding how confidence really is created and how you can have it at any level of riding. So those are the main parts of the workshop. What we're doing here together is each day I am doing a live or a attempted live video for you that takes you through a guided exercise and that discusses a part of the workshop or discusses someone's question a bit more in depth. So today we're going to be talking about the horse's perception of the world. We're going to be talking about the horse's senses, and I'm going to be reading some actually directly from the Balanced Riding course textbook. And this is something that all the students in the Balanced Riding course get as part of the study, because I love for the students to be able to have different ways to interact with the information. So that it's not all just video that you have to go and try to search through videos to find, but that you have it in the book too. So we'll be talking about that because that's part of module 1, is really understanding how the horse perceives things, because this is so important for our communication. And then we're going to do a guided exercise together. But I wanted to actually begin because part of these lives are an opportunity to answer any questions that you have from the workshop. And we got an amazing video in yesterday submitted in the Facebook group, HorseClass Hub, where one of our students and one of our community members was working on applying the concepts from part 1 of the workshop training and the pelvis exercise that we did. So feeling the different parts of the pelvis, understanding the position of the pelvis that really makes for a good seat, that really makes for that stability and that ability to move and follow the motion of the horse. And the rider's question, or the what they were practicing, was going through the different movements. And what I noticed right away was that there was an issue with their saddle. And I wanted to address this here before we go into the topic for today's video, because this is really important. What we have to understand as riders, and this is for any discipline, is that we need to ride the best that we can for the tack that we're in. And what I mean by that is that if our saddle does not fit us well, the saddle needs to fit both the horse and the rider well. And when it doesn't, then we're going to be overriding the tack, meaning we're going to have to kind of fight against our tack in order to have a good position, because the tack, the saddle, is going to be putting us in a position that doesn't work well. And of course, that's not ideal. Now, sometimes I totally understand that if you're taking lessons somewhere, or if you just got your horse and are just getting set up, going out and making big new purchases like a new saddle might not always be a viable option. So there are workarounds that you can do, and there's many different things, different kind of very simple adjustments and kind of hacks that you can make to the saddle to help. But in this case, for this particular rider, I saw something that's really, really common. And it's that the seat was too small And most people think that the seat of the saddle, so that's 15, at least in US measurements, 15-inch, 16-inch, 17-inch saddle, for example. They think the seat of the saddle is bigger if the rider has a bigger bum. And this actually isn't true. The seat of the saddle is more determined by the length of the rider's thigh. So the longer the thigh of the rider, the bigger the seat size needs to be. Because if it's not, then the rider is always going to be in that chair position that we talked about in part 1 of the workshop. So with this particular rider, I said, hey, it looks like this is what's happening with your saddle. For one, as you're making this adjustment and letting the top of your pelvis come back, scoot a little forward in the saddle so you've got room to do that. And if you're still feeling like you just don't have room, because as you try to make that adjustment with your seat, the saddle is pushing you forward, especially when you go back into motion, then you're going to want to look at, can you get access to a saddle with a bigger seat, for one, or can we do some different hacks to at least give the feeling of having the leg underneath of you, of essentially bringing the stirrup bar back by using like an elastic band that helps to bring that back. So we go into more detail in all of these little hacks in the course and in the video coaching. I can give those specific recommendations for each student in the balanced riding course. But I wanted to just talk about that here because it's such an important one. And there's many different ways that the saddle can affect how we're sitting and affect our position. Okay, on to today's topic. So I wanted to talk about senses and how the horses sense the world. And that's why I wanted to come out to this beautiful location out in Canelo's field. We'll go visit Canelo here in a few moments when we go into the sensory exercise. He walked over for his water. But it's so important to be aware that the horse perceives the world so much differently than we do as humans. And if we think about the way that we take in sensory information is how we create our reality. It's how we perceive what is safe or what is dangerous. It is how we construct, what things draw our attention and what things we become very familiar with, very desensitized to in the environment. The way that our brain and our nervous system processes information is critically important, and it really, really differs between us and our horses. So here's some examples, starting with vision. Horses see the world much more in a gray scale. So as humans, we're able to see millions of different colors. We have 3 vision cones, basically 3 ways or 3 structures in our eyes that allow us to see a much wider range of color. Horses see more in a gray scale. Also, horses, the shape of the eye is very different. The way that they focus is very different. So we have a high degree of acuity, meaning if I look at this tree in front of me, I can see the detail of the bark. I can look at the leaves on the ground. And for objects that are close like that, I really see a high level of detail. The horse sees a much lower level of detail, but they're really good at picking up on movement. Obviously, from a survival perspective, it makes sense. So if a squirrel is moving over there in the tree, for the horse, that's going to draw their attention. Where for me as a person, as a human being, I am more able to scan and see the whole surrounding and not as drawn to that little bit of movement. And I have so much more color and more detail coming in where the horse has less of that, but much more drawn here, here, here for different movements. Then we go to hearing. The horse hears much higher pitched sounds. So right now I'm here, I hear some birds chirping. There's some traffic that I can hear at a road that's a little distance away. But the sounds of those birds chirping are more of a high frequency sound. So if I was to have hearing more like the horse, it would be like turning up the volume on all of those high frequency sounds. And for a sound like a human voice, it would be turning down the volume on those lower pitched, lower frequency sounds. If we think about smell, horses have much more acute sense of smell. They've done studies where horses react differently to the scent of a person that is in different emotional states. Horses are able to tell, they're not sure exactly how much horses tell about things like social status from smelling each other's poo, but they're definitely getting information about health status, about who's in the area. They're getting information just about other individuals, just from the scent of other horses' manure. So a much higher sense of scent. It's also one of the reasons that on windier days, horses will often be more skittish, more spooky, because with the wind blowing, they don't have the same ability to really take in the sense of smell and have the safety of their environment from smelling all around. So those are some of the big ones. There's difference as well in tactile sense and how horses respond to touch. But really the big ones, if we think of the differences in vision, in hearing, in smell. Another one with vision is horses are a grazing species, and the way that their eyes change to the light is much more slow, but then they have much better vision in low light. So, they're adapted to more be, say, a grasslands species, so they're not as good at those quick adjustments. Us humans, having evolved from primates being in and out of the forest, we've adapted much quicker changes in our vision. So we can go from light to dark situations and have that change really quickly. The horse doesn't have that same ability. So when we go from bright, sunny outdoors into a dark barn or into a dark riding arena, that change for them is much more difficult. All right, so that was some of the background information. Now we're going to go through a little exercise together. But to do that, we are going to start by just taking a bit of a walk. Because what we're going to do in this exercise is we're going to do an imagination exercise. I am going to ask you to get still, find a nice place wherever you are watching this video, or since this video is now going to be a recording for everyone, you can also just pause it and come back to this part when you are at a good spot. But somewhere, ideally, if you can be outside, or if you can at least maybe be close to a window, that you can have some of the sensory input from the outdoors, because we're going to go into a space of just imagining how the world can be different for our horse. And by doing this, it is an exercise in empathy, really, in understanding how when something might be so clear to us, for example, a bucket that was thrown alongside the road that we pass and we clearly see that it's a white bucket, and our horse spooks at it every day because it gets blown around and is in a slightly different part of the side of the road every day. The horse takes in that information so much differently. The horse doesn't have the same ability of generalizing that that's a bucket, and the way that they perceive their world and the things in it are quite different than us. And when we can have that empathy, we can communicate better with the horse. We can understand what's attracting their attention. We can actually even engage in some of that. So here's Canelo hanging out by his water, and he's going to join us in this exercise as well. So hanging out here with Canelo can give you even more of this insight in the imagination of what it is like to be a horse. Okay, so we're gonna get started with this. Find somewhere where you can just be quiet for a few moments, where you can close your eyes and go through this with me. Okay, so we're gonna start by just taking a few breaths, eyes closed. And I want you first to notice what you are hearing and what you're sensing in your environment as a person. Notice the sounds, notice the smells. After these few moments of eyes closed, you can go ahead and open your eyes again and notice what you see, what you're drawn to. Okay, now I want you to close your eyes again. And now I want you to play with me here. Go into your imagination and imagine that you were your horse. And we're going to start with your eyes still closed. We're going to start with this imagination exercise, this little adventure, with the sense of hearing. Notice the sounds and think about if you were to turn up any of those higher frequency sounds. If you were just to turn up the volume on those, and you were to turn down the other sounds, what would the environment be like? What would you be noticing more? Now take another big inhale. And with your sense of smell, what do you notice? And if you go into your imagination, what could you notice if you were your horse? What do you think might be available? What are the scents that are there that you're not able to pick up on, but that your horse would be smelling, that your horse would be registering? Now go ahead and open your eyes and look around your environment and imagine if you were your horse. Imagine if the world was more of a gray scale. If you could see not just to your side, but if you could see all the way around. But if it was a bit more blurry, imagine if you had to move your head to focus on things. And now where is there movement? What might attract your attention if you had the vision of your horse, if you were literally seeing the world through your horse's eyes? What might look different? What might look threatening? Okay, so you can go ahead and just come back to your human senses. And what did you notice from this exercise? I would love if you could put a comment down below and just tell me what is something that you were drawn to, or that you noticed when you were in that place of imagining that you were sensing the world from the horse's perspective. What was there? So I hope that this was interesting, that this was informative, just learning a bit more about the horse's senses, how they perceive. And again, thank you so much for joining me in this workshop. I really look forward to seeing you back tomorrow. I will choose a location for tomorrow's video with some more, fingers crossed, stable signal so we can actually be live again. But I really look forward to reading through your comments, and I'll be responding to each one of the comments as well. So we will leave Canelo to his day in the pasture, and I'll see you back tomorrow.